different systems, how the suit is integrated into the seat, and it's all just one big circle for this whole spacecraft. So really cool to see those comm checks live. Jessica, thank you so much for walking us through some of the really cool updates, the upgrades. Did you have any other cool stuff besides?
Let's see. So I don't know if you guys can see, but we have the Dragon clean room here. And one of the coolest things is it is right on the main floor of our main building. So thousands of employees walk by here all the time and get to see Dragon in its final processing before it goes to the Cape. On Wednesday, the Crew 1 capsule was in here. It looked almost done. It looks a little empty right now, but that's because that capsule went off into our separate test facility for its final propulsion checks. So we do leak checks and things there, and we do that in a separate facility just because it's high pressure testing. And then the vehicle will come back here, get its final thermal protection system put on, and then it will ship off to Cape Canaveral and get ready to launch 4 astronauts to the International Space Station.
I mean, what's it like to see it? Because when you see the first initial pressure vessel, it looks nothing like the final thing. So what's it like to just kind of watch it go through and you just see little bits get added on, and then the next thing you know, it's a whole spacecraft?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so amazing. I'm so impressed. You know, when you look at a machine, you're like, how does this ever get built? How do people ever do this? And it really is just step by step, one piece at a time. Each piece has its critical function, and you get to watch that being built right in front of your eyes every day when you come to work.
Dragon SpaceX, we are ready and initiating seat rotation.
Dragon copies.
And we just heard the seat rotation's about to begin. So, Jessica, thank you so much. Cool facts about Dragon for everyone to listen in on, and we can see the seats start to rotate now. Pretty soon, Bob and Doug will be in their launch configuration, and they'll be ready to go. And we can see the seats slowly start to rotate. Again, they're in this down position just to make it easier to climb in and out of Dragon. They'll rotate to this launch position to put their backs a little bit more parallel to the ground. It makes taking the G-force a little bit easier for the crew on the way uphill, but most importantly, positions those touchscreens directly in front of them, which is just their gateway into Dragon.
Dragon SpaceX, seats are in the launch position.
We copy.
All right, and confirmation the seats are in the launch position. Let's go down now to Gary in Mission Control Houston, where I know the entire JSC team is standing by and ready to see Dragon take flight today. Over to you, Gary.
Thanks, Dan. Very much so. Great to see good comm checks from Bob and Doug, and that their seats have been rotated into their launch position. Here in Houston, Flight Director Zeb Scoville has pulled space station flight controllers, and all systems are go for launch from the space station side of things. Essentially, the station is prepared for Dragon to arrive 19 hours after launch. Chris Cassidy has completed his preparations for Bob and Doug to arrive. He's got a chance to view some of the broadcasts. It even said they were, quote, looking sharp. Flight controllers here will monitor the countdown, but really it's up to the teams in Kennedy and Hawthorne to get us to liftoff at this point. So we want to hear your comments as we continue to count down to launch. So let's go to the social desk now. Tahira.
Thanks, Gary. So glad to hear that polls are go, at least on your end, and just hoping this weather just works out good for today's launch. I mean, people online are on the edge of their seats. We just checked numbers, and we are up to 1.1 million viewers right now. That's almost double when we checked last time. And right now, we also have Columbia, South Carolina is leading the viewership, so interesting to see how that changes. Let's take a broader look at the conversation online with this heat map of the United States. Now, this shows Launch America mentions by state over the past week, and we have California leading right now with the most mentions, and I'm very surprised. I really thought the Space Coast would take it home, but let's see how this changes over the course of the broadcast. And with that, let's see what y'all are posting online right now. Guys, I mean, check out these outfits. Absolutely love it. Love to just see how people are making things creative for this launch and really making it their own, putting their personal touch on it. Let's take a look at another. Oh, we are back to the Launch America heat mentions, so let's see how that changes over the course of this broadcast. But really fun to see those photos online. Oh, we have another space pet, guys. These do not get old, so please use hashtag LaunchAmerica on social media. Right now, it looks like we have Catstronaut Boris, who is ready for his launch in the Crew Dragon capsule. I love seeing the pet owners unite for this mission. So like I said, definitely use that hashtag. We will be looking for it during the show. Marie, what's the latest at Kennedy?
Thanks to Hero, we are at T-minus 2 hours, 26 minutes, 47 seconds and counting from liftoff of the Falcon 9 from the Kennedy Space Center here in Florida, carrying NASA astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken. You see them right now aboard SpaceX's Crew Dragon spacecraft. It's been a very exciting day so far. The crew has been up since about 8 o'clock this morning as they prepare to head to the International Space Station as part of this Demo 2 mission for NASA.
And as we speak, the astronauts, as you saw, are inside Dragon and have completed their comm checks, so now they can communicate with the teams here on the ground. And their seats have rotated upright to their reclined launch positions, allowing them to see and access the display panel. And now they are about to, they initiate their own suit leak checks to make sure that their seat is in proper working condition before liftoff.
And in just a little bit, at about T-minus 1 hour and 55 minutes, it could happen a little bit sooner though, we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, we will see the closeout team begin to close the side hatch in preparation for flight. And that's going to be one of the key visual milestones on the timeline to liftoff. Now, we want to take you to a couple of special guests we have joining us. They are with Daryl Nail at the OSB-2 viewing location, NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine, and also Kennedy Space Center Director Bob Cabana is there with Daryl. Hi, Daryl.
Hi, Marie. That's right. We're in the fifth floor of the Operations and Support Building here at the Kennedy Space Center with a nice view of Launch Complex 39. And the two men that you mentioned are here to join me to answer a few questions. We're excited to have them both here. And they are, of course, Bob Cabana, the Director of the Kennedy Space Center, and Jim Bridenstine, Administrator for NASA. Gentlemen, thanks again for making the time to be here. Of course, the big story right now, Jim, is the weather. So let's talk a little bit about that. We can see there's some clouds building. That was forecast. You took part in a weather briefing this morning. What do you know about the weather and the decision that was made to say, hey, let's give this another shot today?
Yeah, so what got us last time was the electricity in the atmosphere, and of course today there are in fact buildups. It doesn't look like there are thunderstorms at this time, but they are expected. The question is, when do those thunderstorms go away, and when those thunderstorms materialize, where are they located? We are predicting about a 50-50 shot of going this time, but given the fact that we are in late May in Florida, we have to take every shot we can get. So it's not likely that in a couple of days it's going to be any better than it is today. So we are a go for launch right now, and we are hoping that the weather will hold up. We almost made it on Wednesday, and the trend is better today than it was on Wednesday. So we'll see.
And I saw a forecast that said the clearing is supposed to happen right around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So
that's right.
We're hoping that
launches at 3:22,
right.
Clearing, at the earliest 3 o'clock, at the latest 3:30. So depending on when that happens, we'll either be go or no go. But again, we're going to take every shot we've got.
Also watching the downrange weather for a
That's
potential rescue in case there were an abort.
That's right. So we have these staging areas. When we go from the first stage to the second stage, that's a higher risk evolution. We want to make sure that in the case we have to exercise the launch abort at that point, that the weather is good. And of course, that's off the coast of North Carolina. The big thing there is it's great that we have a launch abort capability. The challenge is that launch abort capability includes parachutes. And with parachutes, you've got to make sure that you've got the weather to come down. If there are thunderstorms or downbursts or high winds, that's problematic for the parachute system.
Right, and sea states as well. Bob, of course, you're an astronaut. You know what it's like to hit the reset button and do it all over again. Get into the spacecraft, get ready to go, only to be told, no, we're not going to go today. We're going to try it again. What's that like? And then tell me about the mindset as you have to kind of reset. Do you feel less anxious? Do you feel more comfortable the second time around?
You know, Daryl, first off, my last flight, we counted down to 18 seconds and didn't go. Man, and when you get to 18 seconds, you're ready. Yeah. The key is, you know, it's the training that we go through. All the repetition that we do, we practice everything, including scrubs. And just because you didn't launch doesn't mean you don't have something to do. So you got to go through those back out procedures. It's all done very professionally. Then it was out of the vehicle and into the Astrovan, back to crew quarters. And we had a positive attitude. We got a good night's rest. And we went through it again. It's a matter of doing your job. And these guys are well prepared. You know, it's all part of what we do.
Yeah, they stopped the count at 17 minutes, but you had it all the way up to just a few seconds. That's a big difference.
And the truth is, the next night, actually everything went really better. You know, the weather was bad the first time. I was kind of glad we scrubbed. And we scrubbed for an issue with the vehicle that they later sorted out. As it turned out, we wouldn't have had enough prop to rendezvous with the Russian functional cargo block. But you know, the next night, it was just a perfectly smooth launch count. Everything just went like clockwork, and it set the stage for an awesome mission.
I think you told the press before you walked out, I think you were over there at astronaut crew quarters, we're going today. I'm wondering where's the source of that confidence coming from?
I just got a feeling, you know, you got to have a positive attitude. I watched a lot of weather down here supporting shuttle missions, and I'm hoping that those clouds over the I-95 corridor, that the Indian River keeps them west of us, and that stuff that's building offshore is far enough off that we can stay in an open window here at the Cape.
Good. Well, we got your positive vibe going, and we appreciate that. Jim, when you were down in the astronaut crew quarters and when they were suiting up, you got a second chance to visit with the astronauts. Kind of tell us about that, and what was their demeanor, what was their mood today?
So again, they seem loose. They were loose last time, they're loose this time. They're definitely ready to go. They're excited. They've been wanting to go for a long time now. You know, I'll tell you one thing that I thought was a little interesting is, you know, Bob Behnken was making fun of Doug Hurley because on Doug's last flight, they scrubbed 5 times before launching on the 6th time. So Bob Behnken seems to think that Doug Hurley is the problem in this case. But to see them joking about that as they're getting suited up, ready to go, yes, they're trained, they're ready, but they're also loose, and that's good to see because they're going to have to be on their game when we launch.
These guys are pretty impressive. Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken. I mean, Doug Hurley, an incredible pilot. Bob Behnken, he's got a PhD in mechanical engineering. I mean,
and he's a flight test engineer himself in the Air Force. Yeah.
Well, in your assessment, why are these guys the right stuff?
Well, this is a test flight, and you know we have great astronauts that are, you know, chemists. We have great astronauts that are botanists. We have really talented and diverse, a very diverse astronaut corps in general. But this is a test flight, and for a test flight, what do you want? You want test pilots. You want people that, for a living, they have made a living flying new things that have never been flown before. And you know, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley are the two people that you would want in a test flight, and that's exactly what this is.
Bob, you're a pilot too. You want to weigh in on Doug Hurley? He seems like you know, he's got the right mentality and smooth customer.
He's a naval aviator, a marine pilot, a test pilot. I'm all in. He's a great guy.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about in terms of the Kennedy Space Center, right? So you've been here since 2007, right?
2008.
2008. Sorry, yeah. Off by 1 year. 2011, the Atlantis came to a wheel stop. Yeah, I grew up here. My dad worked for NASA. My uncle was a contractor. When that wheel stop happened, the next day, my uncle got the layoff notice, right? And it 30, 60 days. It was depressing. We're talking about thousands of people laid off.
Super depressing. Atlantis landed on a Thursday. On Friday, 2,000 contractors got pink slips and walked out the door. Yet they worked on that vehicle. That was the best vehicle we ever flew, the cleanest. That's the dedication of the workforce here.
Right. So, and take me back to that time. You called it a depressing time. You know, the fact that the shuttle program was something that the government completely had ownership of and paid for. Now we're moving into this commercial crew, which you've overseen making that transition. And tell me about that 9 years in which we made that move.
Well, obviously, everybody was really attached to the shuttle. I mean, it was our history for 30 years. It did an awesome job. The Hubble Space Telescope, all the satellites it deployed, building the International Space Station. But when I first got here, I told everybody, the shuttle program's going to end. We have to start preparing for our future. And nobody wanted that. to hear that. But how many times in your life do you get to define what you want your future to be? And we set out on this bold goal of trying to turn KSC into a multi-user spaceport, supporting both government and commercial operations. And I've got a very persistent team. They worked extremely hard, and through a number of agreements, we were able to make it happen. And this is the future. Commercial spaceflight, the administrator says it all the time. We want to establish a commercial environment in low Earth orbit so that we can focus on the hard job of exploring beyond our home planet, to establish that presence in our solar system beyond planet Earth, establish a sustained presence on the moon, get to Mars, establish a presence there. We can't do that if we're locked here in low Earth orbit. And commercial crew with both SpaceX and Boeing, that's the beginning of a whole new era of spaceflight.
All right, very good. Quick question. We've got, of course, a special guest coming back today. The President of the United States plans on being here. Jim, you took him around the first time around. How did that go? I think I saw a picture on Twitter. He signed some space hardware.
That's right. So he took a look at the Orion crew capsule. Of course, the Orion for Artemis 1 is ready to go, and he signed, a piece of hardware that will fly on the crew capsule for Artemis 2. So that's kind of, and not just him, but the First Lady and the Vice President and the Second Lady, they all signed it. So their names are going to fly around the moon on Artemis 2, which is exciting. But I just want to give Colonel Cabana a compliment here, because he did bring this spaceport through a very difficult time. And now it is a multi-use spaceport, and we do have commercial, and we have, in fact, even international launches here, and now we're going to have commercial crew launches. Bob has done a wonderful job transforming this spaceport. That's why we're doing commercial crew. NASA wants to be one customer of many customers. We want to have numerous providers that are competing on cost, innovation, safety, driving down costs, increasing access. But even better today, when I took this job just a few short years ago, our budget at NASA was around $19 billion. The budget request that President Trump gave us for next year is $25 billion. We are in a great position because the President is committed to space exploration. Of course, he's committed to the Space Force. We haven't had this much support for space since John F. Kennedy, and we've got bipartisan support. Everybody wants to see the Artemis program be successful. Everybody wants to see not just the next man, but the first woman on the moon, and that's what we're building here.
Yeah, it's key to it all is that bipartisan support, and of course, what the work that Bob's been doing here. You can see the commercial activity all around this place. We're going to get to some questions on social media real quick that our audience wants to find out. So the first question is from James on Twitter, and he asks, what is the hardest part of going to space? And we're going to have to give that question to Bob.
Well, Daryl, nothing's hard if you prepare for it. And what we are afraid of is stuff we don't have knowledge about. And that's what we do when we learn how to be astronauts. We train, okay? You spend a long time as an astronaut candidate learning. You spend a long time preparing for a mission. For an International Space Station mission, training around the world on all the different modules and everything, it's like 2.5 years of training before you get on orbit for that time to actually do your work. So I'd have to say the hardest part is the preparation for it. But you are so prepared when you go. You just have total confidence. You know that you are very well trained for what you're going to do. You have an outstanding team on the ground supporting you. And that is so important to have that ground support as you climb into that vehicle. You know that they've done their very best to ensure your safety and a successful mission. But after that, it's a piece of cake, except no simulator on Earth can prepare you for what those guys are going to feel. It's better than a cat shot off an aircraft carrier.
I believe it. Maybe one day I'll get to try. The commercialization effort means we want everybody to be able to fly into space. That's
Absolutely.
the goal.
It's a great point about preparation, because that's not the highly visible part. The launch is, and so it's good to know that all that preparation leads to that confidence. By the way, just an update operationally, they're getting ready to close the hatch door. You can see on your screen there, the workers there are getting ready to get that closed, and working on that right there with Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken on the inside of Crew Dragon. Our next question is from Mathis on Twitter, and he asks, what kind of operations will the astronauts do between the liftoff and docking with the International Space Station. I know you pay a lot of attention, Jim, to the operations, especially of this mission.
You bet.
What do you know about that?
So there's a number of things. The first thing that they have to do is, of course, we've got a number of burns to get in phase with the International Space Station. We've got some boost burns as well. We're talking about, operating the rocket engine to get in alignment with the space station. But I'll tell you, the biggest thing that we need the astronauts to do once they get on orbit and before they dock is rest. We need them to eat, we need them to rest, we need them to be prepared for that docking. Once they are in the range of the International Space Station, they're going to start maneuvering the spacecraft themselves. Not automatic, but they're going to do it themselves. They are in fact test pilots, and as test pilots they will test fly this vehicle to make sure that it operates as advertised. And of course then they will dock with the International Space Station. And a unique capability here is it's automatic rendezvous and automatic docking. And so we're going to be able to see that for the first time as well.
That's going to be exciting to see. Thank you for sharing that with us. Jim Bridenstine, Administrator of NASA, Bob Cabana, Director of the Kennedy Space Center, thank you both for joining us. And we're going to send it back to Marie in the studio.
All right, thanks a lot, Daryl and Mr. Bridenstine and Mr. Cabana for joining us. You can see some clouds starting to gather over Launch Complex 39A. We're keeping a close eye on weather. Again, 50% chance of launching today. We just got to see what the weather's going to do. A little bit ago, we heard the crew complete their comm checks live on the air. We saw their seats rotate. That helps get them into a little bit more comfortable position for the G-forces during launch. And more importantly, it helps them be in a better position to interact with the screens in front of them. They completed their suit leak checks. We saw during the interview just a few minutes ago the hatch begin to close. And so inside the white room there, the pad closeout team is in there still doing some work. That hatch closes, it's not as simple as just closing a car door. There's a process to seal it and check it and make sure that everything is sealed properly. Right, Lauren?
Yeah, that's correct. If they haven't already started, one thing that will be coming up next is the leak check. What they'll do is they'll attach a piece of ground support equipment. They don't have it in their hands right now, so it looks like it hasn't started yet. There it is. You can see it there. The closeout member number 5, it's already attached to the side hatch mechanism. And what they'll do is they're essentially checking for the leak rate. And they'll hold pressure there for a few minutes and then track that change in pressure over time to make sure that it's within bounds, making sure that you don't have any issues with those O-rings there that are holding that pressure. And so once they complete that leak check, they will then do what is the called the installation of, or the final installation of the SPEP, or side pressure equalization plug. That's basically a plug that once the capsule splashes down, what you'll do is actually remove that, and what it does is equalizes pressure across the hatch. So once that thing is plugged in, you know that everything is super tight and that you shouldn't have any leaks on orbit.
One of the other things that I think is pretty cool about Dragon, you can kind of see them on the edges there are some of the windows. And I know that Dragon started out as cargo. It was Cargo Dragon. You have your cargo version, and before you moved on to the Crew Dragon version, but you even had windows on the cargo version. Can you explain kind of why that was?
Yeah, the very first Cargo Dragon that we ever launched had a window over the hatch, over the side hatch. And the reason we did that is we've always envisioned Dragon to ultimately be a crewed vehicle. So even in the beginning, for the very first vehicle we ever made, which didn't even really carry much cargo, we put that window there, and it to us symbolizes what Dragon's purpose has been all along. Taking those steps, starting off with the CRS program and resupplying the space station with experiments and food and crew provisions for the astronauts on board, to now putting putting NASA's astronauts in our own vehicle. It's that natural progression to what we were aiming for the whole time.
Mm-hmm. And Leland, what's your take on the touchscreen technology? We saw a little bit about that. Obviously, this is a very different kind of look than what we saw during the space shuttle.
It's the future. I mean, we had our LCD displays, and we had lots of buttons to press, and valves and switches, and I think this new technology will allow us to get through procedures much more much faster, because we had paper flight data file that we're having to turn to different pages and get to things, and I think this will make it much more efficient to go through your malfunctions and your procedures with the touch screens. And I think having the gloves, being able to touch the screens and work within the gloves, everything's kind of sleek and efficient. There's not a lot of wires and things hanging off, and their knee boards, you can see their knee boards on their left knees, and so that's for some extra little notes and things.
The hatch is closed now.
There's some commentary.
We are ready for the post-ingress briefing when you are ready to copy.
And we just heard confirmation on the loops that the hatch is closed, so that is a little bit ahead of schedule.
We are motivated to go today.
We're ready. Go ahead.
Okay, on the weather, we still have some rain showers moving through the area, but we do have a reasonable opportunity today, so we are proceeding into the count. We are going to take a look at both pad and ascent track weather at T-minus 1 hour and 30 minutes, and the next decision point will be prior to prop load.
Okay, we copy.
And on the vehicle health front, both F9 and Dragon health remains nominal with no items of note.
So we just heard the weather is still iffy.
Good news. Thank you.
The weather is still iffy.
This concludes the post-ingress brief. Report when ready for comm checks with Falcon 9 operators.
We are ready for the F9 operators.
Copy. Expect that shortly.
So when we hear that chatter pick back up, we're going to quiet right down so that you can listen into that along with us. But we just heard them discussing the weather briefly, still keeping an eye on that, but the next decision point is going to be before prop load. So we're going to press forward for now and then reevaluate on before they start fueling the rocket. But in the meantime, it sounds like Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon are healthy, so the vehicle's in good shape, right? It sounds like kind of a little bit of a repeat from Wednesday, that we're just keeping an eye on the weather at this point.
You can see on their left legs, well, in that previous image.
And Dragon SpaceX comm checks with F9, you can expect it in about 1 to 2 minutes.
Dragon's ready.
All right, on their left legs there, they have these satchels that are strapped to their legs. Inside are some crew provisions, including these tablets that you see that they have displayed there.
You say, Lauren, those are tablets versus just kneeboards that you can write on?
Or the tablets are inside.
Oh, they're inside.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And so when would they pull those tablets out to use them?
During the mission,
Okay.
while on orbit.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's coming, if the background noise is coming through over the air, but we hear the rain really picking up outside the studio here. So I'm kind of wondering if Bob and Doug are hearing the sounds of the rain clouds opening up over the pad. Looks like it's still kind of patchy out there. But again, we were following some thunderstorms that look like they may be making their way over here. It kind of looks like it's raining from that view. It's a little bit hard to tell through the haze.
All right, launch is now just over 2 hours away. Tahira, you are there with the social teams. Now that the hatch is closed and the rain's picking up and all kinds of exciting things are going on right now as we count down and get into the last 2 hours of the count, I bet things are getting pretty interesting on social media.
Hey, Lauren. I mean, yes, they are. So many different things are going on right now, and I think people online are just wondering what's going to happen with today's mission. I have TweetDeck open right now, and it is just scrolling with the conversation of people around the nation talking about today's launch attempt. We also just checked viewership, and we are now up to 1.4 million people watching this live broadcast, so really hope things look good with weather. And on that note, let's take a look at some of the things being said on Twitter right now. So it looks like, oh, we just have some more future astronauts. I really love seeing the young generation just getting mobilized, getting excited about today's mission. Looks like we've also got some Godspeed and safe travels for both astronauts today. Really do wish them the best of luck on this second attempt. Hope it happens. Some throwback photos, all from people visiting NASA's centers, and also just let's do this. I love this can-do attitude, and I just love seeing that people are still keeping the energy alive for today's launch. So there were obviously some disappointing reactions to Wednesday's scrub, but let's take a look at how people are getting excited for today's attempt. Let's roll.
Ready for takeoff.
Ready to launch America.
3, 2, 1, go!
Ready for liftoff? To infinity and beyond!
I hope you guys make it safe to the space station.
I mean, how fun is that video? I think I will definitely have to attempt the worm after this, but just really glad to see everyone in good spirits leading into today's second launch attempt, and I really hope everybody will have something to smile about. And with that, let's head back to Lauren. Lauren.
Thanks, Tahira. So it looks like people are pretty stoked about today's attempt. Please continue to join the conversation by using the hashtag #LaunchAmerica across all the social media channels.
Yeah, I really love seeing the little kids get excited. I know my 3-year-old is super excited. She's got an astronaut sleeping bag and
Really?
she loves to climb in it. Yeah, it's the body of the bag is a spacesuit, and then the head is empty where the pillow is. So when she gets inside, it looks like she's got a spacesuit on. So she loves it.
That's the inspiration for that next generation of explorers going to take Doug and Bob's place one day. And I think we have some people out there that are so interested in our conversation about the worm and the meatball that they've created something called the worm ball.
What?
Yeah, I was checking my email during that because I emailed you guys the worm ball, and I was like, what is this? I'm having a hard time seeing it, but what is the worm ball?
So it's a NASA meatball, which is, what it should be.
Yes, yes.
Okay, look at
Okay,
it. There it is.
all right, thank you. I need a visual.
So they took the angular NASA logo and put in the worm inside of the meatball. Can you live with that, Lauren?
You know what? That's a beautiful compromise. I'll take it. I'll take it.
It's a nice marriage of the two.
Oh, I love you, man.
Yes, truth. And there is another live look at Launch Complex 39A, and we have had the opportunity to share with you a lot about the SpaceX Crew Dragon sitting on top of Falcon 9, a lot about the crew themselves and the significance of today as the official return, we hope, of human launch capability to American shores. But we would be remiss if we did not explain why this pad 39A is hallowed ground.
We're go, same time, we're go. Altitude, velocity, light.
Many of NASA's storied missions began their daring journey from the exact same spot on Earth. Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. This massive structure of steel and concrete has cradled rockets and guided each on their fiery ascent to space for over 50 years. There can be no launch without a launch pad, and this hallowed ground has a history greater than any other. Having evolved and been reshaped for each new era of spaceflight, it's alive with a heartbeat as strong as the first. Launchpad 39A came to life under the direction of project engineer Harry May as NASA ramped up its efforts to achieve an unprecedented calling.
Why, some say the moon. Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, Why climb the highest mountain?
In 1962, earth-moving machines sculpted its massive pyramid base to a height of 40 feet. Then, concrete was poured to hold it in place. To launch the world's first moon rocket, engineers cut a nearly the length of 2 football fields down the middle of the mound. It was then lined with heat-resistant bricks to deflect 7.5 million pounds of earth-rattling thrust, first felt on Apollo 8. Less than a year later, Apollo 11 launched from Pad 39A. And hundreds of millions of people around the world watched as it landed on the moon 3 days later. Nearly a decade after this Apollo era, 39A again took center stage with a new, one-of-a-kind spacecraft, the Space Shuttle. Millions of pounds of additional steel for surface structures transformed the look, but not the purpose: human spaceflight. In all, 82 space shuttles blasted off from 39A until the very last.
Start. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All 3 engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. The final liftoff of Atlantis on the shoulders of the space shuttle. America will continue the dream.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
With the fleet retired, demolition crews removed the shuttle-era hardware to clear the way for NASA's monumental decision to lease this historic launch site to the private company SpaceX. Today, its sleek and modern design supports a family of rockets that has advanced the commercial age of American spaceflight. Now, 50 years after it first sent humans to the moon, this historic spaceport stands ready for the next wave of human exploration.
And we're looking live again at Pad 39A. We're looking at the pad closeout team. You can identify them by their numbers there, and we heard confirmation of the hatch being closed just a few minutes ago. So again, things a little bit ahead of schedule. And when I say ahead of schedule, I don't mean the launch time is changing. I just mean numbers there. Some of the specific milestones in the timeline, those times are a little bit flexible, but that launch window remains instantaneous at 3:22 this afternoon. And Leland, you know, we just saw a piece about the history of Pad 39A.
All stations, Chief Engineer, on countdown 1 for comm check with the crew.
We're going to pause for that comm check.
Falcon 9, guidance, navigation, and control.
Dragon GNC on countdown 1, comm check.
GNC Dragon, we have you loud and clear.
GNC loud and clear. Stand by for comm check by the propulsion engineer.
Dragon, prop on countdown 1, comm check.
Prop Dragon, loud and clear.
Prop loud and clear. Stand by for comm check with the avionics engineer.
Dragon, avionics on countdown 1, comm check.
Avionics Dragon, loud and clear.
Avionics loud and clear. Stand by for comm check by ground segment engineer.
Dragon, ground segment on countdown 1, comm check.
Ground segment Dragon, loud and clear.
Ground segment loud and clear. Stand by for comm check by launch control.
Dragon, launch control on countdown 1, comm check.
Launch control Dragon, loud and clear.
Launch control loud and clear. Stand by for comm check by the chief engineer. Dragon, chief engineer on countdown 1, comm check.
Chief engineer Dragon, we've got you loud and clear, Bala.
Chief Engineer, loud and clear. This completes the Falcon 9 Responsible Engineer comm check.
And we just saw a thumbs up from Doug Hurley. We listened to a series of comms checks there, and so everything.
Chief Engineer on Dragon to ground.
Loud and clear on Dragon to ground.
Loud and clear. Well, good luck, and let's see if the rain clears up.
That sentiment is shared by all
You
here.
can do it.
Copy that.
So Bob and Doug, along with the launch teams and all of the rest of America, hoping the rain clears up here. But as far as comms checks go, everything sounded pretty normal, pretty nominal there. So we're just waiting on the weather to clear up. But again, there's a live look at Launch Complex 39A, the site of 82 space shuttle missions where they began. And of course, Apollo, the first mission to the moon, Apollo 11 lifted off from 39A. And Leland, you were just 5 years old when that happened. Take us back there.
Marie and Lauren, I was 5, and I was the antenna engineer during the broadcast. I was the kid standing behind the black and white Sylvania television holding the rabbit ears, and my dad said, move to the left, move to the right. And I was trying to look around the television, see what was going on, but they said, no, don't move. They said, no, don't move, stay there. So I never actually saw the landing on the moon, Neil and Buzz walking on the moon, Neil and Buzz walking. And the next day, all my friends in my community were like, yeah, you want to be an astronaut? We just had this momentous thing. And I said, no. I didn't see it. I want to be Arthur Ashe, because Arthur Ashe trained 5 blocks down the street from where I grew up. And my dad talked about his excellence, his perseverance, his athleticism. And so it wasn't until I got to NASA, working as an engineer at NASA Langley, that a friend of mine said, you'd be a great astronaut. And I just laughed at him. And I didn't fill the application out, but another friend of mine got in, Charlie Camarda. And I said, if he can become an astronaut, I can become one. So I applied the next year and I got in the 1998 class. And I think about this, again, storied legacy, Pad 39A. I was there in 2008 and 2009, Space Shuttle Atlantis, the last one that came in with Doug and the rest of the crew. And it's just an amazing time to see this new era with Lauren, with your SpaceX Crew Dragon about to take off.
I never heard that story.
I've got a million stories. A million stories.
Wow. And it's so cool that, you do have a lot of these kids that are watching today who have never seen a flight, a human space flight from KSC before. And this is their first time. And I'm trying to remember back, I grew up in the shuttle era, and I grew up in Los Angeles, and I remember sometimes when the shuttle would land at Edwards Air Force Base, you'd hear those sonic booms, you hear the double sonic booms in school, and we all just knew, oh, that's the space shuttle. It was just a thing. We just knew about that. And it did make me sad that there's an entire generation of kids who didn't grow up with that experience. And I'm just so proud that, today, hopefully, we get to provide that for kids and hopefully have more and more of these launches to the point where it becomes routine, hopefully never boring, but routine.
And there's talent in every zip code, so you have to make sure that every kid has the opportunity to do these types of things. If they believe in themselves, then we give them the right tools that they can use to be in STEM fields. And we have a very diverse group of people up here working together to get Bob and Doug off safely. And I think more people that see this type of diversity will have a chance to say, I can do that too.
Yes. Absolutely. And we have a lot of kids watching today, and we have an opportunity to hear from another really awesome role model, especially for the little girls in the audience. So we want to throw it over to Gary in Houston to talk to a very special astronaut standing by there. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Marie. I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by one of NASA's record-setting astronauts and a recent resident aboard the space station, Christina Cook. Christina, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be with you today.
Christina, we're coming up on 20 years of continuous human presence on the International Space Station, and you were one of those humans. What's it like to see a new milestone like this launch unfold after so much history already?
You're right, so much history indeed, and it's just been great to watch it all unfold. I think for me, the most exciting thing is how NASA is not only innovating in what we do, exploring the universe, pushing the boundaries, getting knowledge on the space station, bringing it back to Earth for benefits here, but in how we do it. We're innovating in the implementation of those goals and of our mission. And what that means is that bringing in the private sector, bringing in a commercial space economy for low Earth orbit, means space is going to be more accessible and more innovative. And it's just an awesome new era of history to be able to witness.
You hold the record for the longest single stay by a female astronaut in space. What's it like living aboard for so long?
Well, it is truly a privilege every single day. I have to say it's a beautiful thing to look down on the Earth and to be able to kind of contribute to a space program that you yourself have held in such high regard your entire life. I would say that the biggest challenge going into sort of those longer times is remaining vigilant. The engineers make it so easy to live on board the space station. Sometimes you forget you're actually surrounded by such a hostile environment. So remaining vigilant both day to day to have that appreciation that you wake up with every day, and then also being vigilant, knowing that things could take a turn for the worse at any time, and you have to be ready to react to that. So it's a great privilege, but it also comes with great responsibility.
You came to NASA after the days of the shuttle program, and you flew on the Russian Soyuz. What does it mean to have this private capability to fly astronauts to the station?
Well, I think it's just a great innovation in terms of our partnerships. You know, when we started out, it was individual countries pursuing space exploration. We brought in the international aspect of it, and now we're really folding in that commercial aspect, bringing the innovation of all of our American industrial power and recognizing that the more partnerships we have, the more accessible, the more innovative space exploration can be. So it's an awesome time, and it brings with it so much more capability into the program as well. So it's not only how we're doing it, but it's what it brings.
We're looking forward to having this transportation from private companies. How does it help you do your job in space?
You know, I think one concept that we have in NASA for safety and to mitigate risk is called dissimilar redundancy. And here now we're bringing up a whole second way of getting crew to the International Space Station and getting cargo, last-minute cargo. So we're increasing how much science we can do on board the space station by twofold. We're increasing how we can, our options for getting items up, stowage items, supplies, provisions, science experiments. So we're really just banking on the extra redundancy to make the program that much more robust.
We're watching Bob and Doug go through the final phases of preparing for this launch. What's going through your mind so close to liftoff?
Oh, it is such a great day indeed. You know, it's interesting because I think it's not so much what is going through your mind, but what's not going through your mind. You know, you're not thinking about all the things could go wrong. You're thinking about enabling success by doing what you've been trained to do. One of the sayings we have is that on launch day, astronauts are sometimes the most calm people in the room. And I found that to be true on my launch day too. I think it's kind of this career culmination of everything you've learned, everything you've dreamed of, and you know that it's coming together in that day and that you're going to finally do what you're prepared to do, execute the mission, and it just really brings a sense of calm and readiness.
NASA astronaut Christina Cook, always an honor to hear from you.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Well, once Bob and Doug arrive at the station, NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy will be ready to welcome them on board. So in anticipation of their launch, he had this message for them.
Hello, everyone. I'm astronaut Chris Cassidy, commander of Expedition 63 on board the International Space Station, flying 250 miles above the Earth. Like you, I'm excited about today's launch and the possibilities it will bring to America and to the world. But also, I'm very excited that two close friends will be arriving and joining the crew. I had the privilege of flying with Doug Hurley on both of our first shuttle missions back in 2009. Together, we came to the International Space Station and helped construct the amazing facility that it is today. Although this will be my first mission with Bob, it was my honor to follow him as the chief of the office when he left back in 2015 to begin training for this amazing mission. Personally, I've been very fortunate to fly in two different spacecraft. Launching from America on the shuttle, and most recently launching from Kazakhstan in the Soyuz. But I can't tell you how exciting it is to know that we're once again launching Americans from the coast of Florida. And finally, here's a story I'd like to share with you. Back in 1981, John Young and Bob Crippen launched on Space Shuttle Columbia, the very first space shuttle flight, marking the last time we flew Americans on a brand new vehicle.
434, Mike, Q-48. Roger.
With them, they flew an American flag, representing America's technical prowess.
Roger roll, Atlantis.
30 years later, that same flag was flown to the International Space Station. This flag remains here today, waiting for Bob and Doug. Our flag means so many things to our country, and this small piece of America represents what we'll be able to achieve together. We'll never stop exploring. And so Bob and Doug can take this very special flag home to Earth, where it awaits its next journey to the cosmos. In a few years, the first Orion crew will take this flag with it around the moon. All of this starts today. I'll be watching outside the window along with everyone else in America and around the world. I can't wait to look out the window and see my friends on close approach. Go Falcon 9, go Dragon, and go Bob and Doug. I'll see you soon.
And there again is a live look at Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where we are T-minus 1 hour, 41 minutes, 58 seconds and counting from liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket carrying Crew Dragon with astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley strapped inside. We can see some raindrops on the screen there. It looks like rain coming down at the pad, but we're still monitoring weather, and it sounds like there's going to be another decision point before they start fueling the Falcon 9 rocket, which is scheduled to happen at about T-minus 35 minutes. So we just heard a little bit about where they're headed. If the weather cooperates today, to the International Space Station. Leland, you've been there twice, and I know just from what you've told us, it's this Leviathan in space and the site of so much important work and partnerships happening.
Right. Chris Cassidy is up there floating in the Columbus laboratory that I installed, or our team of us installed on STS-122. And I think about, using this robotic arm that was made in Canada. The European Space Agency built the Columbus laboratory, and my job was to use that arm and attach it to the International Space Station. And as it was getting closer and closer, the motion just stopped. And I'm like, what is going on? And there are 4 ready-to-latch indicators that have a very slight spring force that I was moving so slowly with the hand controller, the translational hand controller, that spring force stalled out the motion. And Peggy Whitson was behind me, and she said, Leland, there's some commentary. Weather update, I think.
Go ahead, Zach.
Hey, Doug. We're still waiting for a weather update expected at 18 Zulu. Therefore, the next assessment will be closer to the propellant load time. We are currently no-go on launch weather, but we are showing an expected clear of 1830 Zulu.
Okay, copy all. Thanks for the update.
So we just heard if they were to launch right now, the weather would be no-go. However, it sounds like there may be an opportunity if the weather clears, as it sounds like they expect it may. So again, we're gonna keep listening as we continue talking. If we start to hear any kind of chatter, especially if it's about the weather, we're gonna do our best to quiet down so that we don't step on that and everyone can hear it along with us. But Leland, you were just talking about the work on station, and Peggy Whitson was getting ready to tell you something.
Well, so the Columbus laboratory is stalled out. It's about to be attached, and there are 10,000 people waiting. Their job security depended on me installing this thing properly.
Right.
And Peggy said, Leland, push just a little bit harder on the hand controller, and all 4 ready-to-latch indicators went green. And I was like, yes! And that was our primary mission objective, but that paled in comparison to what happened next. Peggy invited us over to dinner in the Russian segment, and we had this meal with people from all over the world, Russian, German, French, African American, Asian American. This diversity that we talked about earlier, were up there breaking bread at 17,500 miles per hour while listening to Sade's Smooth Operator.
What?
It blew my mind. It was Smooth Operator, right?
What an appropriate song for the,
I know.
for the job too, right?
Wow, does she know? She knows now.
Yeah. And Dan Tani actually changed the song from smooth operator to arm operator. So you see arm operator.
I love it. Love it. And Leland, you actually, we were in another taped segment when you got a text from Drew Foystel. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, Drew Foystel, his good friend, just sent me a text saying that the families say hello to all who are watching and thank the nation and the world for their support and interest. And Chris Ferguson just actually sent me a text. He was the commander on STS-135 and one of my classmates from the 1998 class, and he says, "Way to go, Godspeed on Crew Dragon."
That's awesome. It's great to hear those words of support. Thank you guys for watching and everybody following along at home. I mean, the COVID-19 situation has been just a tough time for people stuck inside, homeschooling their kids, still trying to do their jobs, and so it's really cool to be able to watch this happening. And we see the pad closeout team. It looks like they are getting ready, or they've left the white room and they've already come down the crew access arm, so they are getting ready to leave the pad now. And we are going to go now to the Operations and Support Building 2, where Daryl Nail is standing by with NASA's Chief of Staff to talk to us a little bit about some of NASA's ambitions beyond the International Space Station and its work with the Commercial Crew Program. Daryl?
Yeah, that's right. We're here in the mission briefing room at the top of Operations and Support Building here, where there's a lot of important people that are gathering to watch the launch here. And one of those people, it's not me, by the way, one of those people that is important is Gabe Sherman, NASA's Chief of Staff. We appreciate you being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Daryl.
You got kind of the insight of what's coming down the pike here at NASA. So of course today is Commercial Crew, and we're focused on that, seeding the commercial market. But what's off in the horizon for NASA?
Well, I'll just tell you, it's an incredibly exciting time to be at NASA, and you know this. I mean, you're here every day. But whenever you think about what we're doing with Commercial Crew, in the horizon in July, we're launching Mars Perseverance, which is just going to be an incredible thing for us. You look at the end of this year, SLS, the largest rocket in the world, is going through testing right now, going through green run testing, and we're hoping maybe by the end of the year we could even get it right out here to the Cape, which would be just an incredible achievement for our team. So there is no shortage of things to be excited about at NASA right now.
And it feels like everything is really starting to happen here recently with everything that you just mentioned. And if we get that first Artemis launch, that could be right around the corner as well.
Oh man, we're looking at I think late 2021 is what we're looking for. And so you think about SLS potentially moving from the green run to the Cape. You've got Orion finishing up its last little bit of testing. It moved from Plumbrook earlier this year, our station up there in Ohio, down to KSC. So we're looking at checking it out throughout next year, and hopefully we'll have the first integrated flight of SLS and Orion at the end of 2021. And I'm telling you, that is going to be a moment.
That will be exciting.
Yeah.
And there will be a thunderous boom right here at the
Yes.
Kennedy Space Center. So with Mars as the end goal, how does all of this get to that end point?
You bet. No, and I think that's what's so important about the Artemis program, right? Our long-term vision is to get to Mars. But when you think about Artemis, everything that we're doing at the moon is helping us learn, prove out capabilities and technologies, work through the right mission durations, understand how we utilize the resources of the moon potentially to go further onto Mars. So the technology, the science, the exploration, architecture that we're putting together, each and every piece of it is helping us learn a little bit more, prove out a little bit more so we can take that next giant leap to Mars. And so everything that we're doing at the moon helps prepare us to move on to Mars.
How about the activity in low Earth orbit, like Commercial Crew, which is happening today? How does that help us for missions to the moon?
Yeah, I think anytime you're launching humans, you're learning, right? And you're taking what you've learned and you're moving it forward to the next mission. But I think it's really about the business case. If you think about what Commercial Crew is, it's NASA moving from owning and operating hardware to buying a service, right? And if you remember just a few weeks ago, we awarded 3 contracts on the human landing system to commercial companies. And so we're hoping that we move to a day where we're actually buying a service to get our astronauts back and forth to the moon. So actually enabling the commercial market to go from low Earth orbit all the way out to lunar orbit. And so Commercial Crew is a great proving ground for that, helps us prove out that business case, build those partnerships, and then we get a feed forward to the moon. So it means a lot. This means a lot as we move out.
And it's really exciting when you talk about the Commercial Crew, the commercial aspect going to the moon. Right. and those partners. They're going to be studying those landers to see if they are viable for NASA?
Yeah, working through a tremendous process with the commercial providers and NASA engineers, going through initial designs right now, looking at the capabilities that they've proposed, and then trying to make decisions on which landing system goes early in 2024, which landing systems are better prepared for sustainability out in the later 20s. And so that is going to be an ongoing process throughout this year and moving into next. So it's going to be really exciting to kind of see what comes out as, hey, this is the lander that's going to take the first woman and the next man to the moon in 2024.
Right, so different than the time of Apollo when we went to the moon, and that program ultimately came to an end. The idea here, though, is to try to create some sustainability. Talk about that.
Right, and sustainability, you can get to sustainability if you have reusability, right? And that's what we're seeing with Commercial Crew for sure. But whenever you think about our human landing system, you're looking at a system that we put out there at the moon once we get to sustainability, and it's going back and forth, taking multiple trips to the lunar surface, back up to Gateway, which you're familiar with, is kind of our smaller space station we're going to put in orbit around the moon. So we are building an architecture that is going to enable reusability at the moon. Apollo never had that. And so whenever you think about driving down cost and increasing access, reusability, sustainability are critical.
So you get to see everything from a very high level at NASA. What's it like for you personally, I'm curious, to be here at the Kennedy Space Center to watch a launch and to just see this amazing facility where all of this activity happens?
Yeah, I think sometimes people think since I work at NASA, I'm around this stuff all the time. I'm not, right? I don't get to come down here nearly as often as I'd like. So it's just as exciting for me as it is for anybody else in this room. When you think about all the hard work that our team has put in to get us to this day, to actually come down and be a part of it with them, it's just overwhelming and incredible. So we're just a little bit excited.
All right, Gabe Sherman, NASA's Chief of Staff. We appreciate you joining us today and enjoy the launch. I certainly know you will if we're able to get that one off. We're going to toss this back now to Hawthorne, California.
Joining us now is SpaceX's Lars Blackmore to discuss SpaceX's future ambitions to visit the moon and Mars. Thanks for joining us again today for a second round.
You're welcome.
Could you tell us just a little bit about your background and what you do here at SpaceX?
Yeah, well, I'm in charge of entry and landing for Starship, which is SpaceX's next rocket after Falcon 9. And before that, I worked for many years on the same thing for Falcon. So hopefully today you'll see another one of those landings on a drone ship.
Awesome. And speaking of that, what role does reusability play in getting people to the moon and Mars in the future?
Well, it's really all about making human spaceflight affordable. And what you want for that is a 100% reusable rocket. Now, Falcon is only partially reusable, but Starship is going to be 100% reusable. And we've actually already started working with NASA on using Starship to send astronauts to the surface of the moon for the first time since 1972. Not only that, Starship will be refuelable on orbit, and the combination of those two things will let us send people basically anywhere in the solar system with more payload for less money than I think people have really been contemplating. I think for the first time we can seriously talk about things like lunar bases, or what SpaceX cares about most, a self-sustaining civilization on Mars.
Right. So what you're saying is I will have an opportunity soon to get on board one of those spaceships.
I very much hope so. Yeah.
So speaking of reusability and landing, I know you mentioned Starship will be refuelable in orbit, but Falcon does come back and land back on Earth. What are the challenges with actually landing on the moon and landing on a planet like Mars?
Yeah, well, you can't land like a plane, because the moon and the Mars either have no atmosphere or have a very thin atmosphere, and even if you could, there's no runway that someone's built for you. So that's one of the reasons that we do propulsive landing on Falcon, because we want to figure out how to do propulsive landing. That fundamental architecture works on basically any planet. If you have no atmosphere like the moon, you do a propulsive landing burn all the way. If you have a thick atmosphere like Earth, you let the atmosphere slow you down as you float down and do a short landing burn at the end. And for Mars, which has an atmosphere but a very thin one, you do something in between the two.
Wow, yeah, that sounds really difficult, and I'm sure there's been a lot of effort put into that. Can you tell us anything about what we're working on now to get us to a point where we can do a landing like that in such a harsh environment.
Yeah, so figuring out propulsive landing is really the key part of it. But what people may not realize is that every time we bring Falcon back, we do something called an entry burn. So just before we hit the atmosphere, we light the engines to slow the rocket down. That happens high up where the air is very thin. And it just so happens that the conditions there are very similar to what a Mars landing burn would look like. So even though it takes months to get to Mars, and you can only do it every 2 years when the planets line up, we effectively get to practice Mars propulsive landing every time we bring Falcon back, including, hopefully, today.
Wow. And as you mentioned, every time we bring Falcon back, we learn something new. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we learn after the vehicle has returned and we're able to check out the vehicle?
Yeah, so Jessica actually mentioned this earlier, that I talked about how cost is really one benefit of reusability, but reliability is the other benefit. I mean, imagine that you do all this planning to send a rocket up through the rigors of launch and re-entry, but you don't get to see the rocket afterwards. And what we would like to do with reusability, what we've been able to do with Falcon 9, is see the rocket, inspect it, and because of that, we've been able to correlate our models pre-flight to what actually happens when you launch, re-enter, and land a rocket.
Right, instead of just guessing what happened to the vehicle after it's left.
Exactly.
That is amazing. Well, thank you again for joining us today for a second round. Hopefully the weather works with us today in a couple hours, actually. Let's throw it back to KSC with Marie.
All right, actually we have Lauren here. Now today's mission opens up the door to one day, allowing the general public to be able to visit places like the moon and Mars. And as you've heard through several interviews today, reusability is a really, really important part of that. Imagine if every time you flew a plane from LA to New York, you threw it away at the end of the flight. That would mean essentially airline travel would be too expensive, costing hundreds of millions of dollars a flight, and almost no one would be able to fly. And so that's what SpaceX is trying to do here with reuse, allowing not just a handful of people to be able to go to space, but tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of regular folks like you and me to be able to go to space. So, myself, when people like me have a chance to go, I know my dream is to land on Jupiter's moon, Europa. Scientists believe that there is a liquid water ocean underneath the ice and that it has the potential to be habitable. And so I'm super excited to get up close and personal to maybe some space fish. Leland, what about you? Where would you go?
Wow, that's a pretty interesting destination. I think I would like to go to Mars. We've studied Mars so much and looked at it, and I think maybe having a Martian base that is dog friendly, bring the pups along, because I think as we explore, we want to take our families, our cultures, our traditions, with us, and flying with Doug and Bob is cool, but having more people,
There's the dogs.
The puppers, taking the puppers to space. I mean, they're not.
They look ready to go.
They are ready to go. We just needed maybe some like SpaceX type suits for them, But it's that's what it's all about, exploration. Like the settlers go west, they took
the moon. Now we're talking the moon. Will one has ever been, or would you like? So those are going to be some interesting.
While there is not a ton of cargo on today's mission, Dragon is carrying, aside from Bob and Doug, of course. The first of those payloads is a series of custom art pieces entitled Humankind by Los Angeles artist Tristan Eaton. These indestructible double-sided paintings made from gold, brass, and aluminum see how far humanity has come, as well as how far we still have to go. It includes a beautiful homage to the Saturn V rocket, as well as a nod to Bob and Doug's current ride to space. And you can find more images and information about these pieces on SpaceX's social channels. Next, in the spirit of inspiring the next generation of explorers, we wanted to celebrate the class of 2020, from kindergarten all the way to graduate school. So SpaceX and NASA invited students from around the world to submit their photo to fly on America's first human spaceflight in nearly a decade. Each graduate's photo was used to create a mosaic image of our beautiful planet Earth, which we printed, and it's now being flown aboard Bob and Doug's flight on the Crew Dragon spacecraft. We received nearly 100 1,000 photos. That's a ton. So thank you and congratulations, graduates.
Yeah, I've got a couple family members and friends who submitted their photos,
Oh,
so they're
wow.
super excited about seeing their faces go to space in that beautiful mosaic. That was really
great.
cool.
And again, that's what it's all about, you know, everyone coming together with their experiences and bringing them forward to space. And I think regular people flying to space, I mean, SpaceX is going to be flying, you know, non-government people, non-military people, but people that have a desire to explore and do new things and traditions off planet, as we say sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, all this time since we've had the International Space Station, it's been government astronauts performing the research because you're the only ones we've been able to send, right? But
Well, we've
I mean,
had some tourists, though. We've had people that paid their way on a Soyuz rocket
sure.
to go. But it's really the billionaire boys club, you know. That's what Pharrell talks about with, you know, it costs so much money to go to
Right.
space. And I think that price point will come down as we make this more, you know, more amenable for everyday people.
Absolutely.
And eventually being able to fly artists and musicians
Yeah.
and poets, people can tell the story of what they've seen out there in a way that really connects to the soul of people down on Earth, so they feel inspired to go.
Exactly.
Now, following today's mission, we will be one step closer to a future where we can all have that opportunity to gain the orbital perspective and explore new worlds. In just over an hour from now, Bob and Doug will be the first people to launch on an American vehicle in almost a decade. And for the SpaceX team, if I can try to speak for all of us, which is impossible, but I will say it has been an absolute honor to have the opportunity today.
Share in that sentiment. We heard from just a handful of them earlier when Bob and Doug were riding out to the launch pad, but there's so many people that we're probably never going to see or hear from on the public stage, but that have poured their hearts and souls, as you said, into this mission. All the engineers up late hours, checking, checking, triple checking everything to troubleshoot and solve problems and get us to this point. So it's just really awesome that we've made it to this point.
When you think about legacy, Katherine Johnson, who helped get John Glenn to space, her daughters are watching right now. And that, again, that legacy going forward to the future of space travel is powerful.
Wow.
And we heard from two icons of science and exploration on Wednesday, and we couldn't resist sharing these shout outs with you one more time.
Wow, we're making history again. The NASA program. I am there with you guys in spirit. Bob, Doug, good luck. I know you'll be fine. I'll be watching and got everything crossed, arms, legs. I'm tied in a knot. Can't wait for you to get back safely.
This is the first time a U.S.-built rocket has taken people into space in 9 years. It's quite an accomplishment. So for us at the Planetary Society, more rockets means more exploration. More people in space means more exploration. More countries involved in the endeavor of spaceflight means more exploration. This is how we know the cosmos and our place within it. So congratulations, SpaceX. Here's wishing your team, and the crew especially, a safe journey and the joy of discovery. Let's go.
So great to hear from William Shatner and Bill Nye, two very recognizable faces following along on the mission.
Yeah.
And we want to go over to Dan and Jesse in Hawthorne, where we are now just 1 hour and 18 minutes from launch. Dan, Jesse?
Hey, thanks, Marie. Yeah, 1 hour, 18 minutes. I think we're tying ourselves in knots, just like Captain Kirk. We're really hoping the weather cooperates. In about 20 minutes or so, we might clear. So we're getting hopeful. We're getting our hopes up.
Yes, very excited. Again, we're T-minus 1 hour and 18 minutes from launch, and the anticipation is real over here. Since arriving at the spacecraft, Bob and Doug were helped by our closeout engineers to get into their seats, attach their suits to special umbilicals that provide breathing air, pressurized nitrox, and a communications link to Dragon systems. They conducted leak checks, which were successful, and communications checks with the Corps here in Hawthorne, which is the person who will speak to them directly throughout the mission, as well as the launch director in Florida. This is where they are checking their comm path through both ground stations, and the tracking and data relay satellites that we'll use to talk to the crew the entire way to the station.
And after all of those suit leak checks were successful, the closeout team was able to get out of the Dragon capsule and seal up that hatch, which also got its own leak check and was confirmed successful. At this point, the closeout team is out of the pad. They're away from the BDA, the blast danger area, and weather operators are about to kick off their final checks on wind speeds at the pad, which are going to be used during the final go, no go for launch. So we're all keeping eyes on the weather right now. Before we get to that final go, no go, all the various teams at both NASA and SpaceX are going to do internal go polls, just making sure conditions are right with Falcon 9, the Dragon, the crew, the range, and the space station before the final go is given. So let's check back in with the man over in Houston, Gary, for a status on the team supporting the space station for their readiness for launch.
Thanks, Dan. The team here in Mission Control Houston remains go for launch. We're also very hopeful about that weather. All systems on board the station that are required to be healthy for this mission are continuing to look good. Chris Cassidy is wrapping up his workday, and we'll be watching Bob and Doug launch here in just under an hour. So station power and communication systems are normal. Computers and networks used for monitoring Dragon's approach have been checked out, and the cabins and the station cabin's atmosphere and pressure are as expected and ready to welcome 2 new crew members aboard. Mission Control will be closely monitoring Bob and Doug's flight and checking off milestones for most of the flight, and this very same team will be coming back tomorrow to be ready when Dragon gets in range of the International Space Station and we begin integrated operations and prepare for Dragon's docking. So I'll send it back. International Space Station team here is ready for launch. Go Falcon 9, go Dragon, and Godspeed to Bob and Doug.
All right, thanks, Gary. If you are just now joining us, you picked a really good time. We're just a little over an hour to launch. And welcome to our coverage for the mission known as Demonstration Mission 2, or Demo 2. Liftoff time still holding for 3:22 p.m. Eastern. Tracking no issues with Falcon 9 or Dragon. Everything good with the range so far. We're just really keeping an eye on that weather. Over the last 3 hours, our crew members, Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, donned their SpaceX suits in the historic crew quarters suit-up room. After that, they walked out of crew quarters, just as every astronaut to fly from space from this port has done since Apollo 7. And then they were transported over to the pad, where the crew members entered the SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft that we're looking in live.
Today is a historic launch. It will be the first time a commercially built spacecraft will launch people into orbit, and the first time the U.S. has sent people to the space station from American soil since 2011 with the retirement of the Space Shuttle program. Over the next hour, we will conduct a series of polls to get ready for launch, have Bob and Doug arm the launch escape system, and begin fueling Falcon 9. Launch is set for 3:22 p.m. Eastern. This will include a 12-minute flight to orbit and then a 19-hour flight to dock with the International Space Station tomorrow morning.
Today's mission is the culmination of years of work between teams at SpaceX and NASA. Demo 2 is going to be an end-to-end flight test starting with this launch today, going on to dock with the space station tomorrow, and then splashing down at the end of their mission. And this is going to be the final test for NASA to certify SpaceX for regular crew flights to the space station.
We've been hearing a little bit from the crew on board Dragon, which you can see on your right screen. They are currently strapped into their seats and already through communications and leak checks. They're able to follow all the milestones still ahead on those display panels just above them, getting insight into all Dragon and Falcon 9 systems as we proceed towards launch. So at T-minus 1 hour and 13 minutes, let's check in with John I for a status update on the vehicles. What's the update, John?
Thanks, Jesse. Well, not much to add to what Dan and Jesse just brought up. We've had a smooth countdown this afternoon. SpaceX team is working no issues as the pace begins to pick up here in the last 70 minutes. On Falcon 9, we did get the team on console. Earlier, you heard the comm checks between the responsible engineers and the crew. The engineers will be making calls on Ascent for the crew's benefit, so they want to make sure that they could hear them before we go. The propulsion checkouts of the first and second stages are beginning right now. We're watching them begin to go through the process, opening valves. That check will go for about another 10 minutes, and that'll be our last one until propellant loading. Now the team will assess readiness for launch with a final go, no-go poll at T-minus 45 minutes, and that'll be followed by propellant loading starting at T-minus 35 minutes. Now earlier today, Dragon operators also performed a series of checkouts of Dragon's flight systems. The spacecraft is also currently go for launch. Our NASA crew, astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, are currently inside Dragon. The hatch is closed. The SpaceX ground crew has left the tower. The next major event for Dragon is retract of the crew access arm that you can see currently alongside the capsule. That'll happen somewhere between T-minus 45 and T-minus 40 Dragon as it heads into orbit. The weather, that's the one concern. We will get a weather brief at T-minus 1 hour, so just under 12 minutes from now. Currently, the ground and upper altitude winds are go, so that's one thing that we can check to have let up. But we are red on conditions for both the electric field at surface levels, lightning, and cumulus clouds. Expectation that a forecast that'll be those conditions. So everything is focusing now on the weather brief at T-minus 1 hours. Also, we should hope to hear about the final check on the ascent corridor, Atlantic seaboard, in case Dragon had to abort on the way to space for launch. But we will get all of that coming up here very shortly. Now today we are aiming for a launch at 3:22:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, or 19 hours, 22 minutes, 45 seconds Universal Time. Once we begin loading propellant, there's no opportunity to change T0. So once propellant is loading, we're committed, and we'll get one chance at it today. But currently at T-minus 1 hour, 10 minutes, and 30 seconds, everything except the weather is go for launch.
Thanks, John, for that detailed update. We've got an extensive history now of flying Falcon 9 from the Florida coast, and just last year completed a test run of the mission. We're less than an hour from beginning here today.
The purpose of that mission was to demonstrate Dragon's capability to safely and reliably fly to and from the International Space Station. The success of Demo 1 was a really exciting moment,
Falcon
paved
9,
the way
Falcon
for
1
today's
starting.
mission to where we are today. And right now we're getting ready to fly U.S. astronauts from U.S. soil for the first time since 2011.
Dragon and Falcon 9 together have years of operational experience, or what we refer to as flight heritage. As I mentioned earlier, SpaceX has successfully completed 21 flights of Dragon to and from orbit since 2010, including 20 trips to the International Space Station. Not only have we conducted thousands of hours of testing, we've also enhanced and added a number of safety features to Dragon.
Much of what was learned with the Cargo Dragon was leveraged in the design of this new vehicle. It's fully autonomous, which means it can basically fly itself, but also features that full manual override capability just in case of emergency.
And many of the other enhancements help towards SpaceX's goal of reusability and less refurbishment time between missions. So let's take a closer look at these advancements.
Standing at almost 27 feet tall from the very bottom of the trunk to the very top of the nose cone, Crew Dragon's comprised of two main elements. You have the capsule, which is designed to hold crew and pressurized cargo, and then you have the trunk, which holds unpressurized cargo as well as having a solar array and radiator.
And the nose cone at the top of the capsule protects the docking system as well as the guidance navigation control system, or what we call GNC. The nose cone opens for docking and remains attached to the Crew Dragon spacecraft, and that's unlike the previous version of Dragon, and that helps towards our reusability efforts.
Completely opposite the nose cone is that trunk. It has attachment points for Falcon 9, the Dragon capsule, and it can hold cargo. On the very outside of the trunk, one half of it contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system into space. That's the white part, and that uses SpaceX's new picotiling technology. The other half contains the solar cells used to charge the spacecraft's batteries.
And though we only have 2 astronauts on board today, the spacecraft is actually designed to accommodate up to 7 crew members with modular seats that can be removed and replaced by additional cargo. The seats are made of carbon fiber and are custom sized for any crew member flying on board.
The control panel centered right between the pilot and the commander seats and has those 3 touchscreen displays that gives the crew insight into Dragon and even the ability to operate the vehicle and fly it manually.
And finally, our Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature of Crew Dragon, giving the crew the ability to safely escape from the time of launch all the way to orbit.
And as we look to the future beyond this test flight later this year, the first operational crewed mission for NASA will take place. NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins.
Reminder, review your launch commit criteria and indicate readiness at the appropriate time. Step 5469 for propellant load and launch.
That's a good sign. That was the launch director. We're getting ready to pull the teams as we move towards that go, no go for propellant loading, which happens at about 45 minutes before launch. But back to our Crew 1 mission, NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, and Shannon Walker, and Suichi Noguchi of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, were chosen to support this mission. Again, it's called Crew 1.
But today, Doug Hurley is the spacecraft commander for this mission. He previously flew on 2 space shuttle missions as the pilot on STS-127 and STS-135, which was the final space shuttle flight. Here's a closer look at Doug Hurley.
Excited?
Very excited. Yeah, very excited.
You feel ready? Still pumped?
Oh yeah, I think we're ready. I think we're certainly ready.
Joining the SpaceX Demo 2 test. He is a Marine Corps colonel and test pilot. He was selected as an astronaut in 2000. He piloted Space Shuttle Endeavour and Atlantis for STS-135, the final space shuttle mission. Introducing NASA astronaut Doug Hurley.
It's a life-changing process in so many ways to fly into space. It's just overwhelming in some respects. Just the sensations, the rumbling, the shaking, the acceleration. My name is Doug Hurley, and I'm the spacecraft commander for the Demo 2 mission to the International Space Station. This will be the first time the Dragon had a crew on board, and so there's a myriad of objectives we want to achieve for this mission. What would work on orbit, what might not work on orbit, what would definitely work. To be able to just have the entire integrated team that's going to support us getting to and from space station, it was really neat being part of it. You know, we are the lucky ones that get to fly it, but we certainly not for 1 second take for granted the amount of effort that so many other people had to put into this to make it successful.
For Doug personally, he's worked so hard, I mean, through his entire life, to get to where we are right now. As a test pilot, this would be the dream, to fly a new vehicle. So it makes me so happy to see that he gets to be part of this mission, the spacecraft commander. I'm just glad to see his hard work and his dreams come true for that.
It's been a long road in a lot of ways for not only us, but certainly for all the folks that work in the commercial crew program, as well as SpaceX in our case, just working to get to this point.
We're a little over 1 hour, 3.5 minutes away from launch. Now let's learn a little bit more about the man sitting next to Doug Hurley inside Dragon, NASA astronaut Bob Behnken.
My career at NASA has kind of spanned a couple of decades at this point. I arrived with the class of 2000, went through the training program, primarily focused on the space shuttle and the International Space Station, learning those systems. Having launched a couple times on vehicles, you know, the second time was definitely different than the first time. You can feel a little bit guilty of, hey, should I study one more thing, or is there one more piece of information I should get? Am I really prepared or not? So that's definitely different between where I was on my first flight and where I'm at right now.
For me personally, as a spouse, watching everything that Bob has put into this over the last 5 years, the dedication that he's shown, the perseverance is pretty special. For both of us, though, the way our minds work, it won't be until sort of the mission is complete that you have really a chance to savor it and celebrate it. This is a huge accomplishment for an Air Force flight test engineer to be part of the demonstration mission of a brand new vehicle. It's going to be amazing.
Without a partner that has that same appreciation, I think it can be challenging for some folks. There's a lot of work and a lot of time that takes away from family that that my spouse appreciates, and I love her for that. On a deeply personal level, I'm really excited that my son is going to get a chance to see me launch into space. Being an astronaut has been a little bit of an abstraction thing for him because he's seen me do it in old videos, but he hasn't seen me do it for real. And so I'm excited for him to see this launch. Really, my role on the Demo 2 mission is to make sure that we get this vehicle tested and evaluated so that we can move on to more operational missions at the International Space Station. We've got a lot of objectives on board the vehicle that we need to accomplish to really make sure that it's good to go. We'll make sure all those systems are working during the test flight so that the future missions will have them available even if they don't plan to utilize them. Through years of the NASA team, helping to share that experience and teaching them the lessons that we've learned by going through this. Now there's another capability in the U.S. besides NASA to operate something of this magnitude. I want to thank the entire Commercial Crew Program team that's worked together to get to this point where we've got vehicles in the launch pad ready to head to the International Space Station.
If we look even further into the not-so-distant future, flying on a mission to space will be an option for more people as SpaceX plans to also fly private astronauts on board Dragon. Earlier this year, SpaceX signed an agreement with the space tourism company Space Adventures to fly up to 4 passengers on an orbital trip aboard Dragon as early as next year. And of course, it's NASA that is making private astronaut missions to the space station a possibility. We are looking forward to these missions, and we hope that you guys are all too.
All right, we are just 20 seconds away from T-minus 1 hour. This is going to be a really big moment that everyone's going to want to listen to. We're expecting a weather update, obviously hoping that the weather is improving, and so we should find out in the next 10 seconds or so. So we're going to stand by for a moment and wait for the Corps to give Bob and Doug a call, and then we'll all hear
Dragon, the latest.
SpaceX,
we're at T-minus 1 hour. You are go for section 6. When ready, report go for launch.
We'll put it in work.
And that right there was a call for the crew to refer to some of their procedures. They do some final checks. You can see them checking harnesses, checking helmets, just making sure that they're strapped in and ready to go. And once they're done with that, the crew will report their readiness for launch.
SpaceX Dragon in 6.4. Bob and I are go for launch.
Copy, go for launch. And next up will be go no GoPro at T-minus 45.
Dragon copies.
All right, the crew is go for launch. So we are inside of 1 hour, still waiting for the weather update. But I mean, this day is one for the history books. We're returning crewed launches to station from American soil on American rockets. It's been almost 9 long years since we retired the space shuttle program. I remember that day. I'm going to remember this day. It's been a long road to get here, countless hours by thousands of dedicated professionals from NASA and SpaceX.
It's been an exciting week, but this last final hour is just so exciting right now. Today's mission will be Crew Dragon's second test flight and its first test with humans on board. It's been an awesome countdown so far. Weather, we're still waiting for that update, so it's still a watch item, but the crew is go for launch, so at T-minus 45 minutes, hopefully we'll get an update on that weather.
We've had a really clean countdown so far. It started with suit up just over 3 hours ago. The SpaceX team helping Bob and Doug put on their suits, conducting initial checkouts, including an initial pressure and leak check before they got to the actual walkout. And all of that done in that operations and checkout facility. The crew walkout was where Bob and Doug gave their so rises a new era of American spaceflight, and with the